From cranky prep school teachers,
to traversing a Frankenstein world of self-discovery.
we'll be discussing the holdovers, poor things, as well as talking about our next BFI Top 100 blind spot, the Battle of Algiers.
This week on The Film Angle.
So, Chris, we are talking today about, I would say, not to give too many spoilers, 3 very good films.
Yeah, we got 3 heavy hitters today, which is really nice. It's just nice to talk about movies I like. No
Yes,
spoilers.
yeah. Movies I like and movies I really wish had come out before our end of year list. I think that's probably something we'll discuss on later.
Yeah, for sure. Again, we talked about this at length before, but yeah, it's very unfortunate that like the whole UK US release thing just goes over the holiday period and goes into award season. So, look, I think my top 10 might be slightly revised after we talk about this episode, but yeah, I think we should just dive into the movies.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which film do you want to discuss first? Shall we discuss the holdovers first?
Yeah, I think so. I think so as we transition away from Christmas time into well into the new year now. We should say
Absolutely.
goodbye to it.
Yes,
Um,
the late January Christmas film.
is it like do you think that stunts the effect of the movie? Like do you think that watching the holdovers, which is inherently a Christmas movie, it's set over a Christmas period, do you feel like you would have got more out of this or more of a cozy feeling if you watched it at Christmas time?
It's difficult to say. However, I believe the night I watched it was one of the coldest nights uh, we've had
Yeah.
in a long time. So I'm pretty sure it was -6. So I felt pretty cozy when I was watching it. There's no doubt. But yeah, I guess it'd be interesting to see. However, it is one of those films where I'm like, I'm definitely putting this on it in December.
And I'm, I'm
I
I'm
would
a
definitely like to watch it again properly pre-Christmas.
yeah, and I could easily see. I think this film we'll get into is kind of one of the best Christmas movies that we've had in years, and I think I know that's not a big competition because we really just have not had any really strong Christmas movies. The ones we usually have on rotation are like at least 20 years ago plus, going all the way to classics. So I think Alexander Payne has returned with a new Christmas holiday classic that I think I'll be watching every year now. Added to the
Do
Christmas
you
roster.
do you think it revolves heavily enough around Christmas to call it a Christmas movie?
I think it has the messaging and themes and also the aesthetic to kind of carry it on. Yeah, I do think what has to qualify as a Christmas movie? Does Jack Skellington have to be jumping off houses singing Christmas? Does
No, I think it is a film set at Christmas. I'm not sure. I guess it is Christmassy.
I guess because other Christmas movies are so on the forefront of it being about Christmas, this happens to be a really good movie set during Christmas. I think is the distinction there.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Maybe that's where I'm not taking. I don't know. I don't know if you were to be like, oh, are we putting on Elf or are we putting on the holdovers? I'd be like, those are not the same.
yeah, they serve a different purpose, though. I think The Holdovers is more similar to something like It's a Wonderful Life, where it's like, for me, those sort of movies are like Christmas Eve movies. Like, you have the fun
Yeah.
ones that you watch like during the day, you're doing your Christmas wrapping, you're doing your decorations. But like, whenever I do Christmas Eve, I always like to watch something that embodies the spirit of Christmas, like the goodwill, like the good nature sort of stuff that kind of
Mm,
that lulls me to sleep before Santa inevitably puts a
that's
stocking on the end of my bed in
that's
the morning.
true. That's true. I did. I kind of watched one of those films on Christmas Eve. I'm struggling to remember the name of it now, but it had your guy who was the boss in the apartment in it. I'm just going back to through my film history. Remember the Night.
Oh
That's
yeah,
very
sure,
good
yeah,
in terms of kind of like giving you those feelings, the
yeah,
values and morals that are kind of held up during the Christmas time. Definitely recommend that one.
and plus like snow looks amazing in old movies.
Yes.
Um,
I love snow on film, any
I love
any
yeah,
movie. I
yeah.
love snow on film. It looks incredible.
I think Alexander Payne manages to kind of shoot snow whenever it's on screen in this movie, because this whole movie has a real 70s like aesthetic. It wears on its sleeve. Even the opening production logos,
Mm.
the use of music, everything is
I
so
think
deep
they
rooted in
shot
the
it on
70s.
film as well, didn't they? Like proper
Hmm.
70s stock film.
And it's like one of those rare period movies that doesn't try too hard to remind you of the period it sets in. It feels really organically like it feels like you're watching a movie from the 70s at times. Like I felt that way anyway.
Yeah. For our listeners, if you haven't seen The Holdovers yet, and if you're abroad, you probably saw it months ago. Uh, it is about a teacher at a New England prep school who has to stay over the stay over the Christmas break to babysit essentially the handful of students that have nowhere to go. So it's a boarding school, and these kids don't have either they don't have parents to go back to, or they just their parents aren't around, or
Hmm.
just don't want them back with them. And he's been kind of left with the task this year of looking after them. And he's not a particularly empathetic or
Warm.
sympathetic, warm, yeah,
Yeah.
teacher. So he's very much like one of those teachers that you would have hated at school because he's very by the book and he's very grumpy and there's no room for relaxation. It's
Hmm.
a stern talking to the whole time. But the main kind of child, even though they don't feel like a child, do they? The main guy that he is left, midway through the film when it through the relevance of plot turns into
Yeah.
one student instead of many, is somebody who is a bit of a rebel, and although is smart and good with his grades, he kicks back against the system. So you get these two people who butt heads essentially,
Hmm.
having to kind of spend time with each other over Christmas, and well, you can only guess where it goes.
Yeah, and there's also like a tease that Paul Giamatti's character is actually called Paul as well, Paul Hunnam.
Oh
He
yeah.
has yeah, which he has hidden layers to him as well, which are like, obviously develop over time. Like this movie is steeped, I think, with convention.
Oh yeah.
Um, oh, like 100%. I mean, the threads are being pulled all the time here, but I think Alexander Payne, who's a filmmaker I've always been a fan of, whether it's Sideways or The Descendants. I even really liked Downsizing, to be honest, even though that movie got a lot of backlash. I think this is a real return to form for him. I think he manages to really bridge the gap between mainstream audiences with conventions and also um, deep lovers of cinema as well. I think that this is a real like the ultimate crowd pleaser in terms of it should have something for everybody who is willing to sort of open themselves to it. We also have the other character, Divine Joy Randolph, plays
Hmm.
Mary, who is kind of grieving after her son, who has recently graduated from the same prep school, has been killed in Vietnam. And so she also is residing over in the school during this holiday period because she's got nowhere else to go. She lives in the school. And yeah, I think it becomes a trio dynamic movie between the three of
Yes.
them. And I think every character gets their fair due.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They are the kind of misfits come together at Christmas. And although Devon Joy Randolph's character is very much probably second tier compared to Paul Giamatti and first timer Dominic Sessa, who plays
Mhm.
Angus.
Which
Um,
does makes sense for the story, but not too much in the way that she's no way an afterthought of this movie.
oh no, absolutely not. And she was just nominated for Best Supporting Actress. And
Yeah,
to be fair, yeah, like absolutely. If anybody supports a film, it's it's Mary in this. So
sure.
yeah, no, I think she was great, absolutely brilliant. But yeah, no, like you said, it's steeped in convention. You never truly get fully surprised by it. There are some nice moments, but yeah, I think the biggest kind of adjective I could give this film is just like absolutely lovely. It's just the
Yeah.
loveliest film. um, yes, all right, I wasn't shocked or surprised or anything like that, but I was just kind of swept up in it, and it's because you know where it's going, you know you're going to feel pretty warm by the end of it, and a little bit emotional, but enough emotion, enough warmth just to
Mhm.
stay the course. So
I think it's like it's a worthy update of a genre that sort of had its time. The whole, the boarding school fantasy of the teacher that, usually it'd be Robin Williams
yeah,
in the Dead Poets Society, but that this movie almost sort of supersedes that. Sort of, obviously, Paul Giamatti's character is sort of the antithesis of that. He's the other end of the spectrum, where it's somebody who is sort of, maybe not very approachable, kind of warms up and becomes a very likable character at the end. But I think Paul Giamatti is just incredible in this film. I've seen a lot of people online, on certain discourse, saying that, oh, like, yeah, it's a good performance, but is it really a great performance? Is a Golden Globe winning performance at all? Like, we've seen Paul Giamatti do this loads and loads of times before. And I think that's really dismissive. I think that's the sign of somebody who's really good at at what they
yeah,
do. It's like,
yeah,
it's the reason. It's the same thing about like movies that are really beautifully edited, dramas or comedies, never winning an award for editing because you don't notice the editing, and that's
yeah,
kind of part of it. But he is, how are you not warmed up to this guy by the end of the movie? He's so sympathetic. I don't know whether it's the fake eye that does it for me,
yeah.
um, or
That
whether
works. Has the eye has amazing comedic timing.
it has amazing comedic timing.
I think they
It looks like
haven't
it's
fully
always staring at
revealed
you.
how they did it, but I believe the idea is that it's probably a mix of CGI and something.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's crazy. It's like it's so well done. It doesn't like when you watch this movie, if you haven't seen a Paul Giamatti film for years or performance from him for years,
Yes,
you would
yeah,
just
yeah.
assume that was like, oh yeah, he always had that eye.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a minute. I was like, does he have a lazy eye?" And I was trying to think back to other things, and I don't know why my mind always goes back to the Amazing Spider-Man 2 where he's the Rhino.
Oh
"I'm the
yeah.
Rhino!" But yeah, that
Okay,
was
maybe he doesn't always do this type of thing.
yeah, exactly. That's an example to show you that he doesn't do that thing all the time. I'm trying to think, like, even I love Straight Outta Compton, and
Hmm.
he was great in that,
He's
as
just a
the town
character
manager.
actor, isn't he? In every full sense that he has just got that sort of e- enormously intriguing face and inflections on
Mm,
his voice, that he is just an old time actor, that he is so reliable. And I think this is his most standout performance. I love him in Sideways, where he's sort of playing a similar, and that's an Alexander Payne film too. But I think he is just, at his peak here. And I think Angus Tully, who's played by Dominic Sessa, his first ever film, I think, and very first ever TV or anything.
mhm.
Kind of coming out of the canon, really kind of fully swinging, and I think them two are a perfect counterpart for each other.
Yeah,
Um,
and I mean, if he is kind of the main star of the film, like, the film does
sure,
revolve around him more than it does Paul Giamatti, I would say.
sure, yeah, he is our POV character in a sense. I think
Mm,
both of them get their moments, of course, but yeah, it's
yeah.
definitely he is definitely the most sort of, the character that you're sort of on the shoulders of most of the time. But I think the most important thing about this movie is it's so funny. Like, it is. I was like laughing the whole way through this thing, mostly at the expense of Paul Giamatti and his
Yeah.
and his gags, or how he just everything he likes to over intellectualize, as a barrier for everything that's kind of going on inside of him, all his regrets and all his repressions, etc. And trying to every situation he's quoting the Roman legionnaires, or
Yeah.
he's always goes back to the Romans, and at some degree. And yeah, no, I think it's a stellar performance. I think it's just a movie I can recommend to everybody. That's ultimately, I
Mm.
think everybody I could recommend this movie to, and
It
I'm
is very
pretty
wholesome.
I'm very very accessible, but doesn't skimp on actual genuine heartfelt, artistry or emotion that is earned for this film. And yeah, I think it earns everything it does, and by the end of it I feel kind of whole and warm. And I would put this probably in my top 10 if I was to revise it for last year. I think I think it's that good, and it's a shame we got it in January. But hey, we got to see it nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. Where would you have put it, Chris? Where would you have put the holdovers?
Very high. I won't explicitly say, but I would put it very high. I would put it very high.
I guess when we in a few weeks or whenever we get round to doing our ranking the best picture nominees for the Oscars, we will see just how high it is on the list for you.
I don't know. There's still a lot of catching up to do, so who knows?
You never know. You never know. However, Dungeons and Dragons didn't make it to the nominees.
It's a travesty.
Snubbed.
Snubbed. Oh man.
Uh,
You know what? Those sort of movies are though, right? Like we should have more room in our hearts for action, for adventure, for comedy, sci-fi, like horror. We all know every year we have the same conversations. The Oscars are silly, awards are silly.
yeah.
We're not the first to say that, and we've said it before.
Yeah.
So
But we
exhaustedly
still
so,
like to
but
indulge.
we still like to indulge because it's silly, silly fun, and usually we put the Oscar ballots out. Like I know your family and my family did, where we print them out, and everybody gets to vote on the ballot. And whoever gets the most nominations wins,
Yeah.
or most wins out of those nominations. And it's fun to kind of turn that into a gambling exercise from time to time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we all benefit from the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Though I think they have some pretty good nominations this year. So
Yeah, I
it's
think this is
it's a
like
good list.
2023 was a good year.
I mean, I would definitely sub out Maestro for other films.
7
I'm
nominations for Maestro.
I'm not sure I'm talking mainly Best Picture now, but I'm not sure I'd sub out Maestro for Dungeons and Dragons. I'd probably sub it out
Yeah,
for something else. But
it's futile. Yeah, we've both seen Maestro. It's futile to put Maestro in any nomination category because it's not going to win any of them. Um, Bradley Cooper's had a lot of backlash this last few weeks, and I don't feel like he completely deserves it. Like I
no,
really,
I don't think it
you
does.
know, I don't I do think he genuinely has poured his heart into a project that he genuinely cares about. But yes, there is that little tinge of a vanity project within there. Not on the same level as disgraced Kevin Spacey whenever he came out in 2005 and decided he wanted to do a Bobby Darin movie where it was just to showcase him singing. So it's not as bad as that. If you want to see a vanity project, watch Beyond the Sea. Um,
Uh,
but no, there's merits in Maestro, and I could be convinced.
yeah.
Over someone would love it.
I do wonder why we all turned on Bradley Cooper this year. I feel
Yeah,
myself doing it. I don't know why.
he was in Dungeons and Dragons.
He was in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and that made Max
Exactly.
upset.
He's a very talented guy. Like I last thing I'll say about Maestro, it does feel like somebody who is like borrowed from his favorite films and like borrowed
Mm,
techniques and put them in out of flair and like more than and overtly putting themes and points across as opposed to actually having genuine inspiration for putting them in there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but your mileage will vary.
yeah, and you'll probably hear us talk about it more when we do rank our best
Yeah,
picture nominees. So, yes.
away from that. So the holdovers we recommend highly. I think
Yes.
me especially. I think you very much like the film, Alex. But yeah, I absolutely love it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about a movie on the podcast and that I don't like because I feel like I've been very positive lately, and I promise I don't like everything.
Don't worry. Don't worry. Madam Web comes out soon.
Exactly. It's like we've chosen that project specifically just to like counteract our pH levels on the podcast.
Yeah, all this kind of Oscar flair. We're just reviewing like films which have been very very well made. And
Yeah.
shall we talk about the next film that has been very very well made?
Hmm.
Let's talk about Poor Things.
Yeah.
So, Poor Things is Yorgos Lanthimos' most recent film. Yorgos Lanthimos, you may know, he is the Greek director behind films such as The Lobster, Dogtooth, The Favourite, Killing of a Sacred Deer, and he has kind of returned to make probably his. It feels, I think, maybe just because it's fantastical, his biggest film so far, maybe.
Oh, sure. Like this is his big blank check movie. I think he's earned it though because he very quickly established himself. I think in that auteur conversation. I think
Mm.
you know a Yorgos Lanthimos movie when you see it. It has a certain aesthetic to it. Has an off kilter way. It's almost like a counterpoint to a Wes Anderson picture in terms of how people talk to each other in that deadpan, an emotional way, although he takes it to like another level. Poor Things does deviate from that formula a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
it almost feels like it's like part Guillermo del Toro film in a way.
sure, that's a really I haven't heard that. That's actually a pretty good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, for our listeners who have not seen it, it is set in this kind of weird alternate world to ours that's similar but not the same. And it is about a scientist who brings back a young woman. Brings her back to life by putting the brain of her unborn
Hmm.
child into her head.
So
And
this woman committed suicide at the beginning of the movie, and then her this body is retrieved from the river, which the baby is inside.
yes, yes. And then we follow this character, Bella Baxter, who's played by Emma Stone, as basically as like a adult with a baby brain, as she kind of grows through the world, learns to understand it, and yeah, I mean, it's difficult to not go fully into spoilers, but there's a lot about equality and liberation and kind of making your life your own through your experiences. And yeah, she has to run away at one point with Mark Ruffalo to be able to do that.
You know
I
what? You know
recommend
what?
seeing this film before we start talking about it heavily, because we're going to now start talking about it heavily. If you want to see it, go see it, because it is bonkers, and but bonkers
Oh,
in
it
like a
is.
way of like stylistically, it makes sense. It's not a bonkers plot in any way. It's a very kind of simplistic plot. So like easy to grasp, but bonkers in its presentation. But I would say go watch it if you're intrigued. If you're not intrigued, just keep listening to us talk about it, and hopefully you'll want to see it by the end. And if you have seen it, excellent, because we're about to go into it.
That's true. I think you couldn't have put any better. I think you need as little exposure as possible. I think the trailer does a really good way of kind of throwing you off the scent of how much there is in this movie that's fruitful in terms of like not just its story and its themes, but also its humor. I think they keep the Mark Ruffalo performance in the back pocket because I did not
Mm,
know he was going to be such a strong presence in this movie, and that's putting it lightly. I think the first thing to kind of acknowledge is Emma Stone. I think her work in this film is phenomenal. Obviously, she was in The Favorite, which Lanthimos did a couple of years ago, which was a big, obviously Oscar front runner that year.
yep.
And this seems like a real, like a proper collaboration project between the two of them in terms of forming this character. She slips into this role like nothing else. This is a really hard line to toe. Like you're dipping into pantomime territory,
Yeah.
but she completely like loses herself, and I completely believe that this exploration, this character who's just been born and trying and seeing the world and organically developing from location to location to from day to day. It's a real sort of interesting way to look at the world, and I really like Lanthimos's decision to make it a parallel world to our own, where we get these like we get a version of London, we get a version of Lisbon or Paris that's familiar but dreamlike in the sense that everything's in the wrong place or everything's slightly different. It kind of really captures that essence of what a dream is like. So it gives us that room to explore these more ridiculous things that are more in keeping with his style, I think.
Yeah. It also has big Metropolis vibes, I thought,
Oh,
from one of
sure.
our BFI films from last year.
Like in the early black and white sections or when it opens up.
All of it, I thought,
Yeah.
stylistically plays around with a lot of those kind of big, grand designs, the larger than life, where it's like obviously a set, but it's this futuristic.
the cable cars in Lisbon, like
Cable
those
car.
shots. So yeah.
I think that's probably where it clicked. I was like, "Oh, cable cars."
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, no, very interesting. Yeah, like you said, Emma Stone's amazing. Working with the same writer, Tony McNamara, from The Favorite, but also he wrote Cruella, so he knows his Emma Stone and how to get a performance out of her.
I think his writing was more well served this time than it was in Cruella.
Hey, it's not awful, if I remember right,
I
but
must have been in a really bad mood that day.
but Emma Stone's great, and it really kind of it works on the fact that she's a brilliant dramatic actress, but she's also got incredible comedic chops as well, and
Oh
is a
yeah,
perfect kind of role for those two to kind of marry. Because obviously it's very silly to begin with when you have these kind of childlike instincts, and then grows into this kind of woman who's been molded by her experiences. This, as she is the adult Bella Baxter, not that it really gives you a timeline so much, but she definitely feels like a toddler
yeah.
at the start.
I
Um,
think the movie's kind of going on this day by day basis.
yeah, each day is like another year, potentially.
Yeah, but you don't even like really notice. Like you do notice, but it really creeps up on you, like how much she develops, and it's
It's
not
very
really
good.
like it's not like choppy or divided. It's so well like thought out, and it's obviously sped up in time. This development, but it is it's really well done. Um, should we talk about Mark Ruffalo?
You just want to talk
I just,
about
I'm
more.
just, I am just actually bursting to talk about him. I can't. It was quite a full screening when we went to see it, and there were chuckles. I mean, we've discussed here on the podcast before, like in the UK, people just are not that willing to like exercise their emotions when they go see a film on the big screen. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't like that. So I have to sort of like concede to that as well. Um, I really struggled not to like make a scene of myself laughing so much at this film. Specifically his performance, not for the wrong reasons, laughing at the sheer pomp and foppishness of the way Mark Ruffalo plays his character. So at odds with what we've seen him do, definitely like recently. We know he's a classically trained actor, and his background is he can give a stunning performance, but he is going for something else. Everybody, Ryan Gosling, incredible in
Mm.
Barbie, but in terms of hilarious supporting roles that kind of underpin the problematic nature of the male characters of a story, I think Mark Ruffalo kind of runs away with it for me.
Yeah, it's a very similar role in that extent. I have
I
actually
think I
seen
think the I
I've
think the
seen
films are kind of similar in terms like this kind of like is the Frankenstein Barbie, right?
I was about to say I have seen people say that this is the adult Barbie, which which
Although I
is
like,
is very interesting, and it kind of,
mhm.
yeah, I can see it.
I can see it. I like, I really love Barbie a lot, but I like this Barbie even more.
Yep, same. Yeah, Mark Ruffalo plays a kind of very. He plays like a British aristocrat, doesn't he? They've all got
He-
brilliant names. Duncan
he's like a
Duncan
is it?
Wedderburn.
Yeah, yeah. He's like is he an attorney? Because he originally
um,
comes to the house because
yes, with a contract. Yeah,
So we haven't. I don't think we've really broken down the story enough. I suppose because so Willem Dafoe is like almost like Frankenstein in this story. It's completely wearing that influence, the Universal monster influence on its sleeves at the beginning of the film, even the way it's shot in black and white and everything.
yeah.
But
Godwin Baxter, who Bella calls God.
yes. So Willem Dafoe is like hiding behind mountains of prosthetics here, but still giving a pretty great performance. Um, so he is kind of using Bella as an experiment. They kind of form a weird father daughter relationship. They have this other guy called Max, who is Godwin's sort of protege, surgeon. He comes to the university a lot and watches, and they engage together. He invites Max back to their home and kind of courts forces a courtship between them two, against sort of Bella's will, but she seems to be willing for it at the time because she knows nothing else apart from these four walls that she lives in.
Can I
Um,
just say as well, Rami Youssef's character name? Just because I just want to say all the character names because they're so great. Max McCandles.
Max McCandless, yes,
I love it. I love it.
yeah. There are some great names. I'm looking, yeah, all the way down to helpless student number one. Yeah, it's great. It's full of ridiculous names in this film, but again, it's not too over the top with it. So enter Mark when they're courted, and then they decide that they're going to get married. Much more the decision of the men in the household than Bella Baxter, and then comes along Mark Ruffalo, who as Duncan Wedderburn, who is sort of he's kind of there to seal the marriage, right? He's there to make the arrangements, and very quickly decides after hearing about what Bella is and which she comes from, he takes curiosity in his own hand and goes straight to her bedroom and like gropes her and tells tells her to come on an adventure with him, and then he'll return her to marry off Max. So yeah, and that's the movie now. We're off on this sort of weird adventure, and yeah, he plays Dandy way better than like any other Dandy you've ever seen. Like this guy, there's a lot there. There's a lot of sex between him and Bella Baxter in this movie, and every time he's wearing a corset to hide his belly. That gives you an insight to what kind of guy this is. Completely vain, drinks and gambles, thinks he is the greatest thing in the world. He's completely the wrong guide for Bella to introduce this world, but actually the complete right guide because she peripherally engages with other people in her environment who are a bit more a bit more adverse to what Mark Ruffalo is sort of offering her, and she grows through that way and she sees him for who he is, and much more happens than that. But yeah, you have to see this movie for yourself. I mean, there's a lot of movie in here, much more generous than I thought. I thought that this was going to be something that halfway through, okay, are we going to get a little bit sick of, I get the theme of this now,
Mm,
but it manages to be constantly surprising. And I think, being superficial here, a lot of the enjoyment is purely in the aesthetic and the vision that Lanthimos has conjured up here, just married with the incredible performances. They keep you going the whole way along, even if you kind of don't feel like you've got any more of the story left to kind of give you. But the last 20 minutes definitely does give you a little bit more to keep you on the journey.
yeah. It's almost as if like the story is a very simple story about kind of like the men who shape Bella, and then obviously there
Mhm.
is a sequence where she is a prostitute in a brothel, and how that shapes her kind of understanding of sex and the kind of people around her as well. But like each one is kind of like a little fable in terms of like you know, here's the man Mark Ruffalo who's sexually liberating but is an absolute clingy buffoon, and then
Yep.
you have Willem Dafoe, like the father figure that's trapping you essentially. Rami Youssef is kind of like this nice guy who's a bit little too naive and goes along with things, but could make a good could make a good husband.
Yeah.
Before
Yeah.
Christopher Abbott, the ex husband of her kind of body, who almost offers her a way of like, hey, do you want to go back to the life you lived? You've kind of been snatched and taken against your will in a way to live this new
Yeah. I don't think
life.
he doesn't offer at all.
He doesn't offer her
He-
no, but it's that moment of like Bella gets to decide whether she wants to go with him or not, and she obviously decides
Mhm.
to. And I think it is just to see like what are my choices and where do I go from here. And I
Yeah.
love that it was like it is a very simple story in a world, like I said, that is kind of like very out there in terms of style, and I loved how simple it was, and I think it works to the film's to its strengths in a way. And like you said, it helps that it is hilariously funny, and it's just I bloody love this film. There's so much going on, interesting styles and cameras. I don't understand all the uses of cameras, like why there were so many kind of like fisheye lenses
Okay,
going
yeah.
on.
That
Like
he did that a
I
lot in The
don't
Favourite, but yeah,
I
there's even more of it this time around.
yeah, I'm not sure what all the kind of reasoning behind the camera was, but I didn't mind. I was just so enthralled by it, and I just loved the world that was created. And it felt like we truly had like a very, very adult fantasy film that is
Mhm.
also kind of this coming of age film
And
because there
it's more
there's a lot of sex in it. There's a lot of sex, and I think a
mhm,
lot of people have kind of been. Some people have been a little turned off by the fact that there is more sex than the average Western film in here, but I think it's a really interesting use of it because it is definitely used as a tool to move along the story because
yes.
the kind of it sounds funny to say, but when Bella discovers masturbation, that is what kind of drives the story forward in terms of her kind of being liberated and trying to get a better
Yeah.
understanding of the world. So because she's constantly told not to do it, but she is almost because she's this kind of weirdly put together I want to say creature, but she's definitely a very human person by the end of it. She doesn't really experience shame in the same way that anybody else does, and she's always baffled by the fact that people want her to kind of apologize for doing things, or people are forgiving her when she hasn't
Yes.
asked
Yeah.
for it, and it's very interesting. Um, just kind of look at kind of human taboo and all kinds of stuff. There are a couple of scenes that maybe are there for shock value, um, but for the most part, I think used really really well.
Mhm. And I think it's very interesting the way they choose to, yes, this is a fantasy world, but also choose the timing of it to have it set in a more like a Victorian era is quite a bold choice too, which was a period of time obviously where women had even less choice than they have today. So the whole that goes hand in hand with sex and sexual gratification and partners and giving a woman like the realization that the one man she's been with the whole time, there's more experiences to be had out there. And
Mm.
you can learn a lot about people in terms of, of who they are by these sort of interactions. But yeah, this is great. It was one of those movies that came out of, and I tried not to because me and Lauren went to see it together. I was like, I'm not going to mansplain myself out of this movie. Lauren, what did you think of this movie first? So I was redundant not to. I was not wanting to give my four thoughts straight away, but we both really responded to this, and I'm like yourself, Alex. I absolutely love this film. I think
Mm.
it deserves all of its nominations this year that it gets, and I hope it does really well. I think Emma Stone is probably my up there with Sandra Hüller for my favorite performances of 23. So yeah,
I would have put this up high on my top 10 list had it come out before this month. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. I wasn't like massively fond of the favorite,
mhm,
Yorgos Lanthimos' previous film.
yeah,
But I do like him. But I did think that this was him maybe going like when I first saw the trailer, I was like, oh, he's gone very far out this time. And
mhm.
I wasn't like I wanted to see it, but I wasn't like, oh, I have to see this. I can't wait. And obviously, I'd heard a bit of the buzz that it was very good. But I thought, it could be another one of those films that goes either way for me. So I wasn't expecting to like really fall in love with it the way I have.
It's a miracle that it doesn't feel self indulgent. It is crazy that he pulls that feat.
Yeah, it's just so well done. I really like so much about it. I just really fall for the style. I resonate with the story. I love the simplicity of it all. And yeah, it just takes you on a really kind of bonkers but kind of beautiful ride.
There you go. You can catch Poor Things currently at the cinemas right now, can you? As well as the Holdovers. So
Hmm.
yeah, we're both really positive on both of these movies. It was great to catch up and fill in those sort of blind spots that it's pretty unfortunate if all of our audience is is American and nobody listens from the UK or Europe, because they'll have no idea what we're talking about. But no, it was great to catch up on these, and they are both standout films, so you need to catch up with them.
On to our next blind spot from the BFI Sight and Sound Top 100 Films of All Time list. Our blind spot this time is an Italian film set in North Africa about the French occupation of Algiers.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Battle of Algiers. Many people have probably heard of this film. It's kind of one of those films that is, would you say, thrown around as like one of those kind of canonical film school films. Like
Sure.
if
Even
you
though
like
I did not
film,
go to, you went to film school, but I did not.
yes, and I hadn't seen it either. But like it's, you always know that like this is one of those kind of big films that kind of
Yeah,
helped
it's
form cinema in the way that we see it now.
in terms of like introducing techniques that war films were very westernized up until that point in terms of how they were presented, very widescreen entertainment pictures, and this sort of introduced a form of bombast that was a bit more in keeping with like a rustic earthy documentary tone to it, a little bit more
Mm.
of a guerrilla style filmmaking could be brought to like a liberating war film. So it kind of introduced a lot of styles. I think we discussed privately, you and I, that a lot of people actually thought that this was a documentary when it was released. They were that sort of convinced when they had first seen the film, because it was so revolutionary in terms of what it was doing, cinematically.
Yeah, yeah, like it does look like you're watching like the news at times in the way that it presents itself. Yeah, there was a copy of the film that for Western audiences had a kind of card at the front of it that said none of this footage is kind of real or from a newsreel.
Just
Uh,
which is funny, cute by now standards, obviously, but yeah, I mean, because some of the depictions of violence in here, there's a lot of explosive warfare here in terms of bombs or like planting bombs in general in public spaces, and those explosions look crazy real. I mean, like you see bodies like fly up in the air, and I'm like, I'm convinced that's a real body.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Now I
pretty
guess
crazy.
it's from 1966, so they didn't have Google to look up, if what they were
Ethical,
watching.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of like when we were watching what was the Tarkovsky film where they pushed a horse down the stairs?
Andre
We're like,
Andre Rublev,
that's
yeah,
it,
and there was
and we were like,
the
did they
scaffolding
just push a
scene, yeah.
horse down the stairs? And then you Google it, you're like, yeah, they
Yeah, they
did. You're
did.
like, oh,
Did they
okay.
real did they put an asbestos coat on a cow and light it on fire?
I feel like we bring this up every episode. I think we're still quite shocked by it all.
Do you remember
But
that time that girl strangled a cat in Suit and Tango for 30 minutes?
um, yeah, but yeah, thankfully none of this film is real. However, the Battle of Algiers is a real thing that happened in the 50s. So yeah, it is about the kind of French occupied Algiers.
Mhm.
Um, the people of Algiers, especially in the Casbah, form the FLN, which is their kind of like national liberation group, to
Yeah.
kind of fight off the fact that they have been oppressed and marginalized within their own country. Um, and they start to kind of fight back against the French occupiers there in ways which would be deemed terrorism, I guess.
Mhm.
And then the French bring in their own military to sort out the situation, and the French then use a lot of torture and other unseemly methods to kind of root out the FLN and keep control of Algiers, which they did succeed in this battle, but I don't think it was many years until they pulled out of Algiers.
Yeah, and I think it's worth stressing as well that Algeria was searching for independence pretty early into the 20th century, and France had sort of promised it pretty early on, and it was always sort of um pushed away, post First World War, Second World War, and kind of similar to something kind of going on in our world right now. Um,
Mm.
I was thinking a lot about our own world, news and media, and watching this film. It had a lot of parallels, and that sort of, we're doomed to kind of repeat things over and over again. And so it's it's not an uplifting watch by any means.
Mm,
um, but it really, I think what stood out for me, especially when you look at this poster, you are expecting a pretty heavy piece of propaganda in a way. You do feel like there's going to be an objective. This was a commissioned film, so there are those expectations going into it. I was very surprised by how objectively this looked at both sides of I think ultimately it does side with the Algiers, fighters, at the end of the day, and is sympathetic towards them, but also looks at the French military and police in an objective way that is not exactly demonizing or Nazi, you know, putting that sort of Nazi sort of perspective on them. Um, it just kind of wants to look at the black and whites of the story, but also capture the the humanitarian side of it. It wants to capture the emotion, the how people can get riled to move towards something, if they feel like they are downtrodden. So it manages to do all of that in the 1960s, 10 years after this event happened, and kind of be way more objective than anything that gets made today. You think you watch movies that people love, like American Sniper or like Lone Survivor, which are these movies that are just like, you know, everybody else that goes around. It's like we could be on Pandora, we could be on the Xenomorph home planet. Everybody is just shooting at our guys, and we gotta get through this, right? And so we very rarely in Hollywood or certainly in Western films ever have a very level-headed objective when it comes to these films. So for me as a modern viewer, really, really refreshing to watch something that does that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think you said it perfectly there. Like it doesn't, like you said, I think it does lean towards the FLN, but only slightly, because they are kind of the oppressed party in this situation. But it doesn't stray away from showing their kind of horrible, horrible tactics to kind of hit back at the French. And then neither does it shy away from the French's tactics to kind of go in and kind of stop the FLN, from kind of committing these attacks.
Hmm.
The French government, I think, kind of banned this film for a long time, and it wasn't able
Yeah.
to be seen in France. And I don't think it was until um, early 2000s that France even kind of recognized their kind of part to play in the horrors, um, of Algeria, and then obviously the city of Algiers.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, really interesting. And the film itself was used, apparently, according to Wikipedia, was screened at the Pentagon after 9/11 to kind of show the US, what had been done before and how they can maybe kind of rectify some of the mistakes, which they clearly didn't listen to. But it is a film that really kind of looks into how the kind of the marginalization and the oppression of kind of a
Hmm.
place, or and a place and its peoples can turn to extremism, and then that extremism causes further brutality, and how that kind of all just cycles into one another. And it's a really harrowing look, and like you said, you can't not relate it to the things that are happening now. um and yeah, it's kind of, in a way, it's really sad, because you feel like history's just kind of deemed to repeat itself, and we're doomed, like we don't learn the lessons of the past. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's difficult to not get political when watching a film. We
Yeah.
try to stray away, but yeah, man, like the kind of stuff going on in Gaza at the moment is horrible, and I saw a lot of that in the Battle of Algiers, and
Hmm.
the way that kind of the fighting
In terms
there.
of how like stretched out it is too, it's like it's just, the Battle of Algiers was a 11-month like conflict. So
Mm,
this was happening on a daily basis. People unrest in the city, a great divide. So yeah, it is very similar.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, as much as I came out of it kind of feeling a bit like downtrodden and sad, I was also just kind of utterly surprised by what I had seen. It is. I honestly, I think it is an incredible film, and it really took me back.
Mm.
Because I went into this, with that kind of mentality of like, this is a film school film, a little bit like when we watched Battleship Potemkin. I was like, a little bit of homework going on here. This is the homework film. Like, this is the film we should have seen. So I really wasn't expecting it to be quite as powerful and quite as moving as it was, and it's shot incredibly. Like you said, some of the footage feels like it could be real life footage that we're
Mhm.
seeing of
It's
attacks and
very economic,
explosions.
isn't it?
But on even on the scenes where it's not, and it's a lot more kind of film
Sure.
literacy going on with the camera, when you follow Ali Lapointe, who's kind of one of the main characters in the film, who gets recruited from, he's basically like a petty thief who gets recruited into the kind of FLN and becomes one of their kind of leaders. We follow him through the streets of the Casbah and stuff, and like it's accompanied by this incredible soundtrack, and it looks
Yeah.
incredible. It's an incredible um, it's an
It's worth
incredible
saying
looking film.
it's worth saying Ennio Morricone did the score.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it is
that's
brilliant
always
score.
really I didn't know that until I booted up the film actually, and I
No,
got really excited straight away. And I recognized the opening piece. The opening, it's like the theme of the Battle of Algiers, I think it's called. With that opening, there's a sort of piano track that is like very, very ominous, very exciting and kind of riling, but also very like it's oppressive in a way.
yeah,
Like a group of wasps or birds descending on this city, which is also it's quite funny because the city has this very like angular slope to it.
yeah.
So it does feel like anything that ever happens, something descends upon and kind of roots out the problem. Um, the sound in this film in general, though, is incredible. Is this very like samba sound that I don't really hear from any other Ennio Morricone score. It's very like very drum heavy, very very almost like almost very tribal in its sound, but it captures that sort of chaoticness of when something wrong goes on in the streets and everybody going on. It's so economic in terms of the filmmaking. There's so many people who are not actors in this film. Like this is just shot in the
Mm,
streets, and it looks so natural. That's what has that documentary effect because everybody looks like they have no idea what is going on.
yeah,
You know,
and tons of extras as well. Like they
oh,
fill out the streets with people.
literally, I think this is some of the best extra work I've ever seen in the film because I can see its inspiration. I actually thought a lot about Spielberg's '93 film Schindler's List a lot when I watched this in terms of its crowd control and how he uses crowds and manages that and makes it
Mm,
like organic in a documentary way. I don't know what Spielberg's inspirations were, but I could see a lot of that in Schindler's List. So it reminded me a lot of that in a way. And
mm,
yeah, and it's quite interesting. Like it's such a dark film in that way, but it never overburdens you with too much emotion. You're too on the edge of your seat with the nail biting tension created by the filmmaking. Um, that you just kind of are on the edge of your seat your seat the whole time. Those sections of the film where they, like you said, the FLN, they're not completely great in terms of their practices and in terms of how they fight back. They use innocent women, they send them free checkpoints, and those scenes with the bombs inside their purses and they're getting checked and or not checked in this instance because they're seen as being beautiful women and they wouldn't possibly bomb a cafe or
and
anything like that.
westernized women as well. They take off their kind of
Exactly.
different religious coverings, and yeah, they're kind of deemed. Oh, you must be a Western woman. Come on through. We
Hmm.
don't need to check your ID. Just showing
Yeah.
how kind of marginalized that group was in their own country.
Exactly, and those scenes are really nail biting, and then it's juxtaposed with like we get a cut to a guy who's sitting on the street, an Algerian who is just kind of he's in the French Quarter, the affluent quarter, and one of the explosions has just went off that the FLN have committed, and everybody just scapegoats this guy because he looks like the perfect victim, and it's
Mm,
horrifying seeing this guy's face just running down the street as everybody is just scapegoating him,
mm.
and yeah, it's pretty hard to watch actually in those moments, but yeah, great, and it's bookended really well. The opening scene um, has has a nail biting sort of cliffhanger to it that we don't get to the end of the film. Um, which kind of carries you the whole way to see how we get to that moment too. So
Mm.
yeah, this is great. I mean, I can see so much here in a '66 film does right that we still are not doing right today. So we have still a lot to learn in terms of making objective war movies, but they managed to do it here.
Yeah. Do you know Jafar who recruits Ali?
Hmm.
Um, he is played by a guy called Yasef Sadi, and the film is actually based on his account of what happened during the time. It was actually
Wow.
rewritten again after that because apparently it was a little too biased. But yeah, Yasef Sadi, who plays Jafar, Jafar is essentially him. He is playing himself in the film.
Hmm.
So you
That's
literally have somebody who was there, who was part of the FLN and was high up in the FLN, um, essentially acting out what they did, which is a kind of weird kind of reality mirroring
mhm.
fiction mirroring reality kind of thing going on there at the same time.
Yeah. And obviously, these movies are quite lofty in terms of subject matter. So I think you're similar to me, Alex. We like to prepare ourselves a little bit before going into these films and contextualize ourselves so that we're like equipped to, enjoy the film for what it is and be able to explore it and fall into it like we managed to here. Um, so I think that really served us really well here. I think the film is really worth watching. Just please go out your way to see it. I think yeah. I have you seen any other films by Gillo Pontecorvo? A filmmaker I'm not that aware of. I've heard of Burn before, but I have never seen it.
No, no, this is my first of his. I don't even think I've heard of Burn, but yeah, it might be worth giving a watch because obviously I was really just kind of shocked by how much I like this film, and
Mhm.
I can see why this film is as important as it is. Yeah, just fascinating.
And the general opinion from historians seems to be that this movie does actually quite accurately, even though there is a cinematic, inherently very cinematic quality to it. It
Mm,
does capture the essence of the events pretty fairly realistically for a film of its kind. So
yeah,
that made it even more riveting to watch.
yeah. It's a unglamorous reconstruction of events, um, and yeah, just
Although
yeah.
Tarantino uses the Ennio Morricone score in Inglorious Bastards to glamorous effect.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, honestly, if you're a film lover and maybe you felt the same way I did going into this, like just a homework film, one of those kind of films I should probably see at some point.
Mhm.
Do you know what? Watch it as soon as you can because it is honestly um, a fantastic piece of cinema, and it is on the BFI player right now, so you can go watch
Yeah,
it.
and even if you don't have BFI player, it is also included with an Amazon Prime account, so you can watch it that way too.
Oh, okay, didn't know that. There you go.
Because I don't have a BFI account anymore, and that's how I watched it, and it was perfect quality.
Ah,
So
there
you
you
can watch
go.
it there
There
too.
you go. Don't say you
Um,
don't.
I,
We don't have a BFI account.
I
We say that we say sing their praises every week. We need to be sponsored by. Look, BFI.
um,
Chris wants a free BFI player account.
it's like so economic. It's probably the most economic subscription in the film markets as well. So I probably should. Um, yeah, like I think that's it.
Yeah, yeah,
Have you
yeah.
got anything more to say about Battle of Algiers other than it's great? Do you think the BFI list, like most of the movies, what percentage of them so far do you feel like have been homework? I mean, or I feel
Um,
genuinely like 90%. I am glad that I have caught up with 90% of these movies. To be fair, like there are a couple. There are a couple. I know you did not enjoy Celine and Julie Go Boating. And we'll do a retrospect at the end of this whole list when we finish it.
yes, yeah. I
Um,
think that's that's the best way to do it. In terms of films, I have watched for the first time and rated 5 stars. This is like one of three, I think.
wow.
Oh no, one of four maybe, and obviously we've watched 50 odd films so far, haven't we? So,
So
I mean
are we
that's
going to make?
But I have rated a lot 4.5, 4 stars, which means I do really like them. If you
Yeah.
know, think about star ratings in that way, I know it's somewhat silly, but
I find
I,
I actually find this BFI as almost an impossible exercise in ratings and rankings in general,
mm,
um, because I see merits in all of them, and it's really down to how it grabs me as a person, or sometimes the limitations of myself. Um, so, or sometimes what I lean towards. You learn a lot about yourself watching this sort of list because every film is completely different, and you get a sort of quick tour through worldwide perspectives, which is why I love film so much. And I think you're the same, where
mm,
it's this portal to sort of learning about other lives that are separate from our own that we'll never understand or we'll never get to visit or know. And we have this amazing lens as medium to learn about it all. So, love it.
yeah, it is a history lesson in foreign politics and cinema all at the same time. So, yeah, no, it's great, and we will
Next
be
week, we talk about Super Mario Brothers and Five Nights at Freddy's.
no. Next week, I think we're going to try and watch All of Us Strangers, the Paul Mescal and Hot Priest from Fleabag film. And then our BFI film next week will be maybe one you've already seen because it's very popular, North by Northwest.
Mhm.
But a film that is not just a BFI blind spot for us, Chris, but also a Hitchcock blind spot.
I know, I know. I'm literally looking at my Hitchcock box set over there, and it'll be finally time to wipe the dust off the disc and watch it. Terrible, terrible.
Yeah. But yeah, so come back next week for that. That'll be a lot of fun, and or it might not be because All of Us Strangers might be a very sad, emotional time. Who knows? But North by Northwest, I might have seen, and I might think it's a lot of fun. So
Be weird if you came out the other way. All the
absolutely.
strangers is a lot of fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, come back for that. So you can follow us on Instagram, you can follow us on TikTok at the Film Angle, and if you're listening on Spotify, give us a 5 star rating. Just go on the page, just get the 5 stars, and it really helps kind of boost the podcast to new listeners. And similarly on other platforms, but kind of I guess Apple Music being one of those. Uh,
Mhm.
just write us a little review telling us how much you like it, or tell us you don't. Give us some feedback. Always good to
Do
improve.
not give them that option because they'll take it.
It's always good to be told where to improve, Chris. We want to make things better each and every episode.
Okay.
But yeah, so that has been the
I'll
podcast
crumble.
for this week. I'm Alex.
And I'm Chris.
Goodbye and good night.
Good night.